Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Isn't this an amazing little conference? This is my first time being in Iowa. I've never been to Iowa before. It's a really cute little city. I love the warmth. I really think, I came from Dallas, so Bentonville is where I live right now. And I think Iowa reminds me a lot about Bentonville. Someone was asking me, hey, how's Bentonville? And I said, I go to yoga 4 times a week, and you can assure that you're going to be doing downward dog with pretty much 6 other people that you would know. For sure, that's guaranteed, and that's how close-knit Bentonville is. I don't think Iowa is quite small as Bentonville. I think we can get started. Today's talk is going to be all about how I, in my world within Walmart, infused some of my previous learning about agility. I have an internal customer, so I'll talk about it a little bit more. But at the end of this talk, if you guys have any questions, please come and ask me. Let's sit down, have good discussions. I love brainstorming, and I learn from it too. There are feedback cards on both sides of the door. So when you leave, make sure you are leaving feedback. I take feedback really well. There is an NPS at the end of the presentation. If you can, give me an NPS score, which is more specific that I can grow on. It would be pretty awesome. I have a 15-year-old who plays tennis. She's an avid tennis player. She has been playing for about 4 years so far. How many of you play tennis? Any tennis players in the room? It's a great lifestyle game. It's amazing. When she started, she pretty much would go into a match. First round, she would lose and walk out. Then she kept playing and playing, and she got better and better. 2 years ago, we looked at her career, her tennis career. She had lost overall over about 85% of her matches. 85% of her overall match she had actually lost. She had only won about 10 to 15% of her matches, and that's how tennis works. If you read any tennis books, it's a math. It basically tells you how many hours you spend on the court and how many matches you play, and that's the number of wins you would have, that's the amount of growth you would have. So like a Serena Williams has been playing since 6 or 5 or maybe since she was born. So the number of wins shows how many years she has been playing. There are some gifted players within that, and they see early wins, but most of it is a math game. What's fascinating about Veronica, who's my daughter's loses and wins are, the first time I saw her playing, she would go into these pretty early on matches and she would lose. And then over the time of the next 6 months, she would win some of these matches and she would go to the next level. And then over a year period, she started playing the southern region. Over the next couple of years, she started playing nationals, and she now plays for a lot of nationals and all that. So it's fascinating to my eyes to see my daughter. It's very hard to watch her lose, by the way. I'm one of those parents that has to go somewhere else and not even watch her. But it's fascinating to see the growth, even though she lost. So that purposeful growth is what I'm going to talk about today. How do you purposefully fail and grow as part of agility is what today's talk is all about. A little bit about myself, Vanathy. I started out as a computer geek. I have a master's in computer science. Quickly realized that I love working with people more than computers. And when I married the two, I went into product management. Then as I looked at where are these decisions being made when you become a product manager, I traveled through the life cycle of a product and then ended up where I am today. Most of my last 15 years I've spent in the online world working through multiple websites. I've solved all kinds of customer journey within the website. Search, navigation, digital marketing efforts, supply chain integration, new PIM integration, you name it, I've done it. These are all things that happen on the website to make you as a customer happy. I felt like there was this part of me that lacked knowledge in merchandising, which is what we consider as the heart of retail. Merchandising is where a company decides what product are we actually going to sell. Those are the people that make those decisions, and I always felt like, how are those decisions made? I know I'm going to sell those products on a website, but who is making those decisions and what is behind those decision making comes from the merchandising team. So I decided to go learn about that and be a product manager there, and here I am. Humble student of merchandising for the past 1.5 years, learning internal product and also scale. Where else could you learn scale other than the Fortune 1? So that's what I've been doing. How many of you are Walmart customers? Raise of hand. Every day, thank you. Thank you for shopping at Walmart. Appreciate it. How many of you shop online versus offline? Pretty good amount, right? So we know stores are not going anywhere if you look at the landscape, but the online channel and the convenience of shopping is growing and improving. Walmart is at an interesting place right now, which is they have to figure out what is going to happen in the next few years. We cannot afford to sit back and watch everything else happen. Walmart is a cool place to work, and by the way, I did not have a whole lot of respect to Walmart before going into Walmart. When I did my research, I was very hesitant to take the role, and when I knew what I was going to get myself into, is it a Titanic, is it slower to move, what am I getting myself into here? I slowly learned about the company and the culture and all that, and it was fascinating to me, and I obviously took on the role, and I've been very happy since. It's a people organization. So my customers are the ones that are making those decisions as to what to put on the store. I have about 2,000 plus internal customers. They are buyers, and they're supporting organization, planners, merchandisers, that are doing the art and the science of putting products into the store. And I want to talk about a little bit about how I serve and we serve them. We are called the digital merchant team. I'm air quoting it because we're the people that are transforming the way they work. How many of you have heard the buzzword digital transformation? Yeah, it's a buzzword that's going around right now, right? What do you guys think digital transformation means? Someone? Anyone? What do you guys think digital transformation means?
How the consumer sees the information.
Great. Any other pointers? Maybe newer technology. As soon as we say digital transformation, isn't that what comes to mind? They're going to take all the old technology and transform it to the newer technology. But I loved your answer because it goes back to the customer at the end of the day, right? It is, are we making the right decision for that customer that is walking in? Are we making it easy on them is what is more important. So we are the team that is transforming the digital landscape for our merchants. And what does that mean? It divides into two areas. One is helping them have better tools to make better decisions. Meaning, let's just say previously they were using an Alteryx workflow or a spreadsheet or whatnot to make their decisions. We provide advanced analytics to make better decisions. We provide data science models, AI, and whatnot to help them make decisions. They are still making the decisions. We are just the people that help that. And then let's just say they were having people, 600 people execute on something. We're the team that helps them automate some of those processes and making sure that it happens faster. I'm also going to quickly touch on this to give you a little bit of context as to how we are divided. This is the pillars, how we call it, and that's the way our teams are divided. I'm going to illustrate that using this cookie aisle. How many of you are Oreo fans? If you are like my household, we go through one a week. The assortment team is the one that is deciding what is the product that is most sold on the cookie aisle, in this example, Oreos. And they are the ones that are saying, how much of space should we give Oreo versus Chips Ahoy? So assortment involves all that decision making, and that's one of my team. Pricing is the other team that decides what should that Oreo's price be so that the customer comes to us to buy it. When I go to Walmart, I know price on the Oreo is going to be cheaper, so I'm going to buy it, right? That decision involves the pricing team. That's my other team. Today's example, I'm going to use a use case within pricing and how we solved it. Availability is all about replenishing the shelf with the right amount of products. Looks like my availability team screwed up. You see that empty shelves there? And then the bottom three are all about internal tools. The one thing I want you guys to know is cost is a very important variable within Walmart. Everyday low price, you guys know it, that's our mantra. We love and breathe and we live it. So cost is our profit lever. So I've never worked for a retailer where price was not a profit lever. Let me explain that a little bit. If I go to, I don't know, Dillard's and buy this jacket probably has an 8 or 9 times the markup of something that they bought it for. Let's just say they bought it for $10. I'm buying it at $80 or $90, right? But Walmart, on the other hand, is going after their cost, meaning they will negotiate the heck out of a product and make sure that savings is passed along to you as a customer. So price is a very important area, but cost is even more important for us. Does that make sense? Cool. So as we talked about all of these digital transformation and agility and yada yada, I start thinking about it and wonder, why do companies want to do Agile? Linda talked about the growth mindset and how it's easy for us to, go after and fail, right? We want to fail, deliver often, learn from it. We also want to look back, the retrospectives that she talked about, on what we did and what we did not do. And also own it as a team. This is very important in Agile. We want to own what we do as a team. It's not about this, right? We constantly say, oh, the product person did not provide me the right requirements, or the business person did not talk about what they needed, or oh, the tech person did not put out the right kind of technology. No, that's not the case anymore. When we became an Agile team, we own whatever happens as a team, and we do it together. Yet, in my case at least, I didn't understand why there were so many failures, and the failures were not very purposeful, meaning we were putting out value, but we were not transforming things. We were not taking an entirety and changing the way people were doing their business. We were putting out, maybe in my case of Alteryx workflows, right? We would include another field. We'll introduce a new field to pull a report from. That's not very transformational. So for me, it was super confusing as to, even though we had a great Agile framework, why were we not putting out great products? So if you look at this one, the right side was working like clockwork. It was amazing. We had all the Agile ceremonies in play. We planned, we iterated, we had sprint cycles, we had all the right ceremonies. We talked all the talked. But the left side, what is happening there, right? So let's look at this. How many of you are, this should look familiar. This is the typical Agile development cycle. Has anyone ever wondered what fills that? We think there is a backlog coming my way. This has been my struggle for years now. I've had my great technology managers come to me and say, I need a product owner from your team. Come sit with my team 24/7 and work with our team closely. And I'll be like, great. When do they learn what they need to bring to the team? How do they know what the team needs to go after and work? There's always that split, right, as to is the product owner even set up to be successful in their world? So what fills? What do you guys think? I always wondered that. So today's talk hopefully tells you how I solved for that. I saw a lot of this happening in my world. Customer says, I love Starbucks caramel macchiato. Users love Starbucks coffee. That's what my UX person was taking it as. And then my product person even more generalized it and said, Users love coffee. And then the developer comes in and says what? Has that happened in your world? No, yes, right? I mean, this overgeneralization of things, at the end of the day, we may deliver a lukewarm hot drink, right? Isn't that what we do? And how is that delightful to a customer who said, I love Starbucks caramel macchiato? He may have been super specific. He may have liked the caramel within. Maybe he likes macchiatos. But we delivered him a lukewarm drink. So at the end of the day, we need to make sure we are actually transforming the way that they are thinking about a hot drink, not delivering something that's meh, right? So the problem at the end of the day is not being customer-centric, one, but also solution jumping too fast. This one is so near and dear to me because I feel like I've grown personally on this as well. I used to be a solution jumper too. And then I figured out I'm solution jumping way too fast. So today, I'm going to answer these 4 questions. How many of you ask yourself before you go into a sprint life cycle on these 4 questions? Are we working on the right problem? Who are we solving the problem for? Do we know the customer that we are solving the problem for? When do we know we are done solving? It's not an endless iteration. When do we know we are done solving? Does the solution I just deliver solve the original problem? Do we ever answer these 4 questions in our sprint life cycle? At least I know I was not doing. My team was not doing it. So today we are going to see how I answered those 4 questions, and hopefully you're able to take it back and you're able to solve within your world as well. I want to talk about 2 things, and as soon as yesterday I gave a talk at the Product Tank, and as soon as we say research, everybody goes, oh, who wants to do research? It's going to be very long-winded. It's going to be boring. See, I see that. And that's not what you want to think about research. If you don't allocate time to be able to research, we will fail. Today's talk, I'm going to focus on directional research and leave foundational research out, but I'm going to give a quick snippet of what these 2 things mean in my world. In my assortment world, when I walked into it, there were 115 tools. I kid you not, 115 tools that my 20-people team was maintaining. Why there was 115 tools, how they are going to bridge that, no one knew, right? So I had to go in and do a foundational research. I brought in 700 buyers, split my team into 2, and said, Team A, your job is research. Team B, your job is to go focus on the incremental value we are delivering. We locked ourselves in a room for 3 months. We figured out the foundation of who my customer is, what metrics am I solving for, how am I going to solve for this, how is this picture going to come together overall, right? That's foundational research. The assets that come out of it are things like customer journey map, a current state and a future state. Right? You want to have a North Star to your vision. So you want to make sure you have a future state journey map. A good idea of who your customer is, and I would recommend personification of your customers. And a really good empathy map, meaning where are they suffering the most? How are they feeling about the existing products? Why should we even go after those and fix? So that's foundational research. These things exist at ASUS, even for Walmart. For a good another 3 years, we don't have to go back and do foundational research, right? If you spend a good 3 months, you got a really good idea of your customers. As your products evolve, yes, you will go back and revisit portions of it, but you don't have to redo this large effort again until your entirety of your world changes. Let's just say Walmart goes into delivering products via newer technologies. We may have to do another different type of a customer journey. In this case, the foundational research is one and done every 3 years. Let's look at directional research. Directional research is the one that I'm going to focus on today and talk about it. It is the short stint of a foundational research. You have to make sure before you put work into a sprint cycle, you take your time a little bit out of this world and take a step back and say, is this really a problem we need to go after? Is this something that we should be doing? Does this actually solve something? These are questions you absolutely need to answer before you start a sprint cycle. So I'm going to talk about the directional research and how we solved it using a framework. I call it the fuel. You can use fuel alongside with your design thinking process, your shape up, whatever you may be using. I could care less. These are what I call a mile checker. These 4 things are mile checkers that you will essentially use to ensure that you're thinking about the things, those 4 questions that I talked about. You're thinking through those questions and answering them as you go into this. Framing, understanding, experimenting, and listening. Framing is all about questions. Who, what, why, how. It's the question phase. And then understanding is going into it and saying, how am I going to solve it? It's the favorite part of it, the solutioning phase. Experimenting is testing what you just put out and making sure that it's actually going to solve. And then listening. We all become experts at it, and we forget to listen. I'll tell you, one of the biggest problems we have as a group is that we don't actually listen. We have to listen purposefully. I had a really good business partner. His name is Creighton. He has been with Walmart since probably he was born. He probably was a test tube baby that got sold to Walmart. I don't know. That's how at least it feels. He was a buyer, and then he grew in roles, and he's my really good strategy partner. He always comes to me and asks, he'll say, hey, let's go solve that. And I'll be like, what's the problem, right? And he'll be like, why are you always torturing me with problem statements? And I asked, okay, Creighton, will you dedicate an hour of your time to do an exercise? Bring your team along. He said, sure. So he had a team of 10. He came in one day. He gave me an hour. I split his team into 2, Team A, Team B, and I put them in 2 different rooms. I asked Creighton, what do you eat for breakfast? He said, I eat a toast every morning. So the teams had to go make a toast for Creighton. They said, sure. Each team had 20 minutes to ask Creighton questions. And then at the end of the 20 minutes, they had to come back and make a presentation on what their solution was. Team A came up with this amazing lightning toaster that would toast like that in a matter of seconds. Team B came up with this awesome app that delivered scrambled eggs to his desk every morning. Which team do you think won? Any guesses? Team A, raise your hands. Team B, raise your hands. Team B was the one that won. Why? Any guesses? Yes. They actually asked the right questions. The previous night, I asked Creighton, why does he eat a toast? He said, it's quick, it fills my stomach, I can move on with my life. What do you actually like for breakfast? Well, I would love eggs, but I don't have the time to make it. Team B was the one that dug into the problem and made sure they actually solved the right problem. So it is important to not look at the face of something that you're handed to and then immediately go solve it. You have to actually dig into the problem and understand, why the heck am I even solving it? So that's what this framework allows you to do that. This allows you to go dig and ask those questions, understand it deeper before you put it in a sprint cycle and solve it. So let's talk about an example. How many of you are bagel and cream cheese fans in this room? Yeah, if you were like my household, we go through those 16 ounces like anything, right? Like every week, 16 ounces. I'm going to add a little bit more complexity to this scenario and say, I'm going to add more flavors, right? In the world that I live in, we call these lines and ladders. In the world of pricing, the way a buyer prices this is when you go to shop something, if you look at the strawberry cream cheese and the original cream cheese, you will expect those two to be priced the same way, correct? And you would expect the 8-ounce versus 12-ounce to be priced a tad bit higher, but still providing you value, right? So these are the lines and the ones that go up in size or the ladders. I don't know how many of you shop apparel, sure you buy clothing somewhere, but when you look at the size differences, usually you'll see small, medium, large being the same price, and the XL and an XXL being a bit more pricier, right? So that's another example of a ladder. Lines and ladders are the way a buyer can efficiently price anything. If you think through the matrix of items that they are going through, I'm showing Philadelphia cream cheese here. Then if you put Great Value, which is our private brand, on top of it, and then if you add all the niche brands, they have hundreds of items that they have to price. So the easiest way they can price it when they put it, when they do this, it's super easy for them to price it in a more efficient way. But they constantly break it. How many times have you gone into a store and said, that is a ridiculous price for a tiny bit more amount of product. I'm not going to pay it. How many of you have seen that, right? Yeah, I see nods. So we constantly break lines and ladders. And over the last 15 years, we have put out about 5 or 6 versions of lines and ladders where buyers can go in and edit these itty-bitty lines and ladders and make sure that they are working fine, right? So it's a 15-year-old problem that I was handed to and I was expected to solve for. That's the example that I'm going to use today, and hopefully it's interesting. Framing. Why is framing important? This is the key place you will move your sprint from incrementality to innovation. Just remember that. This is the place when you ask questions, when you dig into it, that's when you know you're not going to solve it in a very incremental way. You're going to exponentially innovate on top. In Creighton's example, this is the place where they went from a toaster to eggs. We need to make sure that we are asking the questions during this. So it's very important to frame. I'll tell you, it's the most boringest thing to do. My team fights it all the time. Why? Why do you guys think people hate problem framing? It's hard. It makes them think. We love solutioning over talking about problems. There's an Einstein quote, I don't know if you guys have read it. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I will spend 55 minutes thinking about it, and then 5 minutes solving it. So it's very important that we actually frame and talk about our problems. Apparently I cannot hold my clicker. So here's how we did it. And here's a very normal day in our life where we at least spend an hour framing our problem. And don't, in the back of your mind, keep thinking, when are they doing this? We will come back to that. We spend about an hour to a day, depending on the size of the problem, doing problem framing. Our teams involve themselves. It's usually an internal team activity. They sit around a table, they pull all the data artifacts and the problem statements that they have heard before. Mostly it doesn't end with a question mark. All problem statements you may have heard is, I want this, I want that. It never ends with a question mark. So it's a very good indication that people are talking about symptoms, not actually problem. Unless and otherwise you have a question mark at the end, do not believe that. Go dig into it. So we actually engage in a very healthy debate. We talk through what they have all heard, why one person's opinion is better than the other. These are the places to actually beat out some of the negativity that the team may even have about it. For example, in Lines and Ladders, everybody kept saying, It's a 15-year-old problem. We've tried to solve it so many times. Why are we talking about it again? Those types of feelings are brought out here as well. We try to answer at least 5 W questions. Make sure you are asking the why. Why? Why? Right? Ask those questions. When you ask a bunch of why questions, most of your symptoms will be ruled out in the first or the second why. So what? What if we don't do that? What's going to happen? So you need to make sure you're involving your team, making sure they're sitting down and framing it. So what happens at the end of this exercise? We have one or a handful of how may we statements. Remember, they have to end with a question mark. If they don't end with a question mark, go back to the exercise, redo it. It has to end with a question mark. It has to have the customer you're solving for. Not a persona, the customer. Name the customer. In our case, we took the buyer, Stacy, Philadelphia cream cheese, and made sure we are solving for her, right? You need to make sure you're naming that customer. You have to have a metrics to success. And this is one of the hardest things to do, metrics to success, so gray. In some areas, it's black and white, conversion, AUR, whatever it may be. Here's how we think about metrics to success. We start writing our release notes. How would you sell it after you have developed a feature? Right? If you start writing it right at this moment, you actually will know what metrics you're going to measure yourself with. It's the easiest way to understand what metrics you're going to measure yourself with. So we write our release note when we are writing our problem statement. And I'll tell you, the team had an aha moment when we started doing it. And guess what? In this case, when we started digging into it, we started with, how may we have our buyers maintain the lines and ladders? Isn't that the original problem we started with? Then it evolved to, how may we consistently offer our customers value? So when we dug a little deeper into, why the heck does lines and ladder even matter? What if we don't have lines and ladders at all? Well, you're breaking the value to the customer. When the customer walks into the store, looks at a 16 ounce, and looks at an 8 ounce, unless it's a better value, they're not going to buy it. Well, let's prove it with data. So we pulled a bunch of previous past sales, and we consistently saw that we had lesser sales when we broke the value. So it proves to us that when we solve this, it'll provide better value to the customers, ultimately selling better for us, right? So at the end of it, what is the problem statement? How may we ensure our merchants are always understanding the impact to the value? It evolved from, hey, Vanathy, go fix lines and ladders, which is a 15-year-old problem, to, how may we ensure our merchants are always understanding the impact to the value? Such an evolution, you guys. It really is eye-opening every time we do this exercise. Please ensure that you do it. Before we leave framing, I want to call out a couple of things. Don't hesitate to stop working on a problem. It is such an odd thing to say. We're all solution jumpers. We like to solve everything that comes our way. Stop working on problems that don't make sense. If they fail in your second why, you need to stop it. You need to go dig further with your leadership or your executives or your customers. You just need to stop working on it. Don't work on it. Hold off on solutioning. This is a tough one. Please hold off on solutioning during this phase. Let's go into understanding. This is the fun portion. My team actually enjoys it. Why is understanding so important? And I'm going to talk a couple of things here. Previously, when I used to solve problems, we would think of a feature, and we would go work on that feature, and then we would go deliver this feature, right? The understanding phase in my world has evolved into workflows, not a single screen, not a feature. You got to make sure you're thinking through in workflows. So how do we do it? We spend about another day on it, or a week in the worst case, but most of the times we have averaged it to a day. We make sure we are talking through workflows, problem where they are seeing, and what is the journey in that problem. A small little exercise, but thinking in workflow. We start co-creating what the future state could look like in this session, right? You need to start thinking through what does the future state could look like. We brought in Stacy for our Philadelphia example. So you need to make sure your power user is co-creating the solution with you. This is where you're going from, I know what my problem is. I know what my current state is. How could her future state be different? How could I deliver her the caramel macchiato, right? That's what you're thinking through here. How do I pick power users? One tip. I pick the most noisiest customer you may have. There are two advantages in picking that, right? One, you have them on your side. They'll always be your good proponent to how amazingly you're solving. The other one is they are your innovators. Believe it or not, your worst noisemaker is your innovator. Get them on your side. That's who I consider as my power users. Make sure you bring them on. At the end of this understanding phase, you have a current and a future journey, workflow, not a solution. You will have a solution as part of it too, but you need to make sure you understand it in a journey. Multiple prototypes, a scrappy version to test. This is interesting, right? We live in the world of perfection, and perfection is the enemy to getting anything done. Make sure you have a scrappy version to go test. I'll tell you, one of the secret things that I've learned in the last 1.5 years, the scrappiest versions are the ones that delight them because they're seeing it in progress. They can make tweaks, and you're not going to take every feedback, and you're not going to make tweaks and everything, but they love seeing it. The power users love seeing your thought process into it. So make sure you have scrappy versions to your MVP. An assumptions list. This is important, you guys. Make sure as you assume as you're solutioning, you make a list. In our exercise, we live in a room around us. It's all whiteboards. So we have a corner that has all the assumption lists that we go through. Make sure you jot down your assumption list, because guess what? During experimentation, you're going to run through your assumption list and checking it off, right? Was my assumption right? No, my assumption was wrong here. So make sure you have a very good assumption list. A lot of times without this assumption list is when you fail later. When you go into a UAT cycle, when you actually go deliver, when you have complainers, it's because of this assumption list, because you made some broad assumption that your solution is going to work. So make sure you rule that out here. So in our case, in our cream cheese, when we drew the workflow, it was super interesting for me to watch it. We have a new product come in, or let's just say there's a new price comes in. My buyer will immediately take that and talk to the vendor, because that's the first step they do. They go into negotiation of the cost. They're not pricing it yet. And they did not see lines and ladder at this point. They had no idea what their lines and ladders were. Then they went into competitive analysis. They wanted to see how their competition had priced them so that they can price them according to that. Then they went into pricing that specific product, still not seeing lines and ladders. Then they are about to hit go on it. That's when we threw them on the lines and ladder whirlwind. What do you think they are doing? First, they were shocked. Wait, I went from pricing 1 to looking at 60 products? How am I going to price that? So it was really odd that we hadn't given them this information as ahead of the time as possible, right? So we dreamed of this workflow where we brought our competitive information and our lines and ladders together. Because guess what? Their chocolate, as I call it, my team teases me all the time, their chocolate was the competitive information. They lived and breathed the competitive information because that's where they can actually go back and negotiate better price, better cost. And so they always were ready to consume competitive information. When I put the lines and ladders beside it, it was much more digestible for these people. We not only did that, we also gave this set of information during cost and price. That's at least what we dreamed of. And we tested it with Stacy, and she loved it. She was like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. I want this. So at the end of the day, the right place in this example for us to influence was not while pricing. Yes, lines and ladder is a functionality to add prices, but it was actually during cost for the buyers. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter as long as you get the right result to the customer, each one of you, right? Why does it matter where they see it? Yes, it's one of pricing's functionality, but I got to influence the buyer at the right time so that they're making the right decision. So make sure you're aligned to the outcome. If we hadn't actually framed our problem the right way and thought through it in workflow, we would have still developed a newer, cooler way to go do lines and ladders. Would we have ever fixed the workflow? Would we have ever thought through the workflow? Probably not. So you need to make sure you think through that. Okay, 2 quick call-outs. Make sure you're bold in your sketching. Have multiple different versions of it. Go with the most radical idea that you may have. My UX users, I love UX users. I actually have a passion to UX too. But they are so resistant to start sketching because they need to know every nth degree of the information before they start sketching. This is the time to push them to sketch the most radicalist idea. And the other thing I want to make sure you guys know this, when I say internal teams, it includes my developers as well. And I'll talk through it at the end as to how I brought them in. But I saw most of my developers sketch the most amazing idea. Sketching can be done by anybody. It's not a UX thing. Everybody that has a marker and a paper can sketch. Please start drawing. Please start talking in drawings because it actually helps grow a better solution. Push your boundaries. Make sure you're constantly pushing, how could I do this better? This is the phase to do that. The next one we're going to jump into, my favorite phase, experimenting. I'll tell you why experimenting is so important. In my case, I'm Walmart. Every one of them is going to take another 3 months, 6 months, and $1 million before I deliver something, right? I want to avoid that. How do I quickly know where the value is? How do I go after and understand how I'm going to deliver value? That's one of the most important reasons why we experiment. But the other big reason why I encourage experimenting is, as product managers, as developers, as human beings, we get so attached to our solutions. This is the place you need to get attached to your problem and not your solution. How many times have we actually had product manager lobby for why their product is so amazing without talking in, this is the problem I'm solving for? This is the phase to make sure that you are attaching yourself to the problem and not the solution that you just developed. So how do we do it? We spend about a couple days on this. We want to give it enough time. This is the time we bring not just Stacy, but the rest of the buyers. For example, we brought in coffee to test our solution. We brought in our rest of the cream cheese market. We brought in our shampoo. Like, we bring in other teams to make sure that our solution is going to work across the board. This is the other place where you confirm metrics. Remember the release notes that you wrote during problem framing? This is the place you make sure, did I actually write the right release notes? Am I actually going to deliver what I got? What happens at the end? You have a problem solution confirmation. You definitely have a confirmation during this time. You haven't even started developing yet, but you have a confirmation if you're going to solve it. You have a metric gradient. This is very important to remember, you guys. Your metric is going to be in a gradient format. It's not going to be in one number. Don't let that discourage you. It's going to have a high, medium, low, or we thought this is what it's going to deliver. And that's okay, as long as it's in the ballpark of what you thought its success is going to be. So remember, a metric gradient is actually a good thing. And then you also have a feedback and an NPS. Please ensure you are taking feedback. Collect all the feedback and an NPS. We do both because feedback gives more of a specificity on what they liked and what they did not like, and NPS gives you the overall, how much are they excited about it? How much are they delighted about the solution? So make sure you do both. So in our case, as we thought through, our metrics showed up as we were able to double our engagement, obviously, because we are putting it in 2 different places at this point. We were able to provide a better value prop. Just when we tested that solution in coffee alone, it was a multi-million-dollar upside to sales just because they had poorly priced an item on Folgers, right? Folgers is one of our best seller, and when they had priced the bigger size in a very poor way, we knew what the upside could be. You're obviously going to make dollars at the end on this one. We were able to show that we were doing better than competition, and that's where their chocolate was. Remember, they loved that competitive information. So when we actually put competitive information beside our prices, they loved the solution. We were infusing the medicine within their chocolate, and that was the best way to put it in front of them. Few quick notes. Don't hesitate to scrape a solution. This is the phase to attach yourself to the problem, not the solution. And also make sure you put out the scrappiest solution. I've seen in my lifetime where the most embarrassing versions where my UX person literally pulled the sheet off of my hand, winning, right? Make sure you don't stop yourself just because it's not to the perfection that you expected for it to be. The last one we are going to talk about is listening. Guys, this is very important. I know we went through problem framing, we understood the solution, we even experimented. So now why do we need to go back to listening? We have already listened to everything. Synthesizing that feedback that you received is when you're actually going to be doing true listening. So make sure you are doing listening, and it becomes super important during this phase to actually decipher the feedback you got, right? Listening phase could, on its entirety, keep you or derail you off the track that you were heading. So make sure you do that. How do we do it? We spent about a day or 2 on this. Overall, this whole thing should add up to a week. Just so you guys know, all 4 together should add up to a week. This one, we spent about a day on an average, a couple days sometimes, depending on how much of feedback we got. We bucket our feedback. We say this is in our cream cheese example, we said this will fix the lines and ladders exponentially. This will fix the experience for lines and ladders when they actually go edit lines and ladders. This may or may not solve a problem, right? Like you bucket the feedback into true tangible things that you can go after. You also understand what are you going to act on immediately versus later. I was telling someone last night, this is the way I divide my backlog. I have a now, and then I have a later, and then I have a never. I do have a never. Somebody asked me, why do we need to store all those never? You gotta make sure you say no to certain problems. You need to make sure you understand what you're not going to solve for. So make sure you have the backlog clearly defined for the 4 days of work that you just did. This goes back to our internal teams. We kick our customer and our power user out of this. This is still our product, UX, engineering teams that sit together. You have clear MVP for what you need to go deliver, and you have a clear next steps on it as well. At the end of it, you would have a sprint breakdown, Your next research list, this is very important, you guys. Research is part of your sprint. And then a never solved problem list. It's very important to call that out as well. In our example, just by looking at the workflow, we were able to get to the core of the issue. We knew what other additional enhancements we could make. We knew what all it would make to delight them. But just by simply changing our workflow, no engineering effort, we were able to solve the problem. A 15-year problem was solved, simple workflow change. So make sure you look through the workflow. Notes, don't divert. Oh my gosh, we call ourselves on these things. We call it squirrel every time we talk about something else. We say squirrel, squirrel, because we will divert from the problem that we are talking about. So make sure you don't divert. Truly pay attention. Listening is the most important time, just like problem framing, where you synthesize what you heard. So make sure you listen. Now I'm going to get to the most interesting part of it. How do we put this or infuse this into our sprint cycle? My Scrum Masters, whoever's in the room, sorry, were sticklers on 2-week sprint cycles, right? They were like, oh, all sprint cycles need to be 2 weeks. They would sit in a different building, and they would be like, product managers are not bringing work to our table. We are not seeing the backlog build, blah, 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 blah. I said, we're not going to build the backlog without you. You need to come sit with us. You need to build the backlog together. We need to own the backlog together. And by the way, I hate that word. We need to change the word into something else. Anyways, so now how these teams function is we went from a 2-week sprint cycle to a 3-week sprint cycle, and the first week is always research. That's when we discover and define. And then they naturally go into a sprint cycle. And whatever they cannot solve goes into the next cycle. But again, it's a 3-week cycle, it's not a 2-week cycle. At the end of the day, there were some amazing things happen because of this. When I walked into my pricing team, I pulled a couple of developers and I asked them, hey, price gap is one of our biggest metric. That's how we measure our teams. Price gap is nothing but how amazing is your gap on pricing between you and your competition. That's one of our primary metrics. So I called my developer and I asked, hey, how do you define price gap? No one knew. They didn't know what price gap meant. They didn't understand what metric they were developing against. They didn't understand how their work mattered in the big picture. After we started doing this, we multiplied our creativity, multiplied our understanding, multiplied the passion to delivering something because they are part of the team. They know why they are there. And I'll tell you, over the years, I've always wondered, why does e-commerce get all the cool developers? Why do the developers not want to work on some of the internal products? And I'll tell you why. Because e-commerce is a problem that they are living and breathing, and it's easy for them to understand. If you don't have this discovery and definition going on in your world, at the end of the day, they don't know what they are doing. They don't know what they are solving for. We underestimate that team togetherness. When they come together, you multiply your creativity, productivity, passion, X amount of times. So make sure you bring the team together. At this point, my team is all co-located, and they sit together with a product person, a UX person, and a bunch of engineers. Scrum Master visits here and there. But I'll tell you, at the end of the day, that team, core team, needs to sit together and grow solutions. One more quick reminder, fuel. Framing, who, what, why, how. Make sure you put it in question marks. Understanding, journey of the current and the future. Workflows, not just features. Experimenting, make sure you test drive your solution. Listening, gather feedback and actually use it. Don't just gather feedback and not listen. Make sure you listen. I want to end with a quick note of my daughter's tennis. She has been playing tennis for the last 5 years. I love the way she has grown. Tennis not only gave her just the confidence to be able to play a singles match. By the way, if someone plays a singles match, I've played it, it's the most enduring thing because there's thousands of eyes watching you and you're standing in this large court and playing by yourself. It's very excruciating. She has grown herself in life, in her confidence, even the way she handles her homework, her school, boys, etc., right? So it's important for the team to grow together like that too. They have to understand what they are doing. Their failures have to be purposeful. They have to understand why we are doing sprint iterations. If they don't understand that purposeful failure, they don't grow stronger as a team. So let's make sure we include discovery and definition as part of our sprint cycles to actually put out better products. Survey says that only 13% of our products in the world are successful. Can we make it better? I think we as a team can make it better. I appreciate your time. Please give me NPS feedback. I would love to take your feedback. I take good and bad well, and this is my learning process. I want to make sure I grow too. Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.